Good evening. I am Alexis Hutchinson, the sports editor for the Star of Zion, and I am excited to bring this virtual panel to you to celebrate National Black Women in Sports Day. I would like to bring on our panelists today, some of my friends in the industry, DeeDee Merritt with the NCAA, Tahira Bellot with the Las Vegas Raiders, and Sahar Abdur-Rashid with MLS. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you all for joining me. I look forward to us just having this casual conversation to talk about your journeys in sports. I do really, really, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy, busy, busy schedules. So first, I'm going to ask each of you to just share your journey in the sports industry and what initially sparked your passion. And DeeDee, I will begin with you.
Absolutely. You begin with the non-athlete in the group, but I appreciate that. DeeDee Merritt, Managing Director of Leadership Development at the NCAA. My interest in sports was sparked by my late mother. In our household, sports was on the TV all the time, whether it be baseball, whether it be football. I'm a big Green Bay Packers fan. Whether it was Wimbledon, the Olympics, whatever it was that was sports related and was on TV, my mother had it on. And so I developed an interest and a passion in sports from a very early age. My body did not catch up or respond to that. So I was not coordinated enough or had the athleticism to participate in sports, but I understood the importance of sports. And so when I had the opportunity to start working at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee many years ago, I jumped on it because I thought, what a great place to work when you get to work on sports all day. And it just sort of took off from there. And so I am still a big supporter of sports, a big supporter of, my fellow women in the space. And just thank you. I'm so honored to be here today.
Sahar.
I just want to thank you again as well for allowing me to be on the panel with women that I consider both my friends and those that I admire. My story is much like yours, DeeDee, so it probably is good that we're doing a lead up to Tahira being the athlete of the three of us, because I too was not the athlete. I actually am much like DeeDee. I think it comes from part family and then part environment. Whereas DeeDee talked about being a Green Bay Packers fan, I live, breathe, and everything within me is Philadelphia sports. I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia. My dad was a junior Olympian with gymnastics when I and heard those stories growing up. My brother played every sport you could possibly think of, with the exception of football, because my mother did not want him playing that at such a young age. But every weekend we were somewhere doing something. And so I think that was in the background of my, childhood and environment. My friends all played. I was a competitive cheerleader growing up. And then, but I wanted to be a lawyer. And so for me, that was going to be my path. I went to college and I was, student government. I was class president 3 out of the 4 years in high school, just all the things that were the path to becoming a lawyer is what I wanted to do. But at that time, I thought that the path to get to law was through communications. So I went to school thinking that communications was going to be what I wanted to do, and then it was going to lead me to law. I was a commuter student. My parents tricked me and told me if I stayed home, they would buy me a car my freshman year of college. I did not get that car until senior year. They tricked me. However, it was the best decision I didn't make for myself. I was riding the subway one day on my way to campus, and there was this billboard, and it was talking about the School of Tourism and Hospitality Management and Sports and Recreation. And I was reading this billboard and I'm like, I wonder what they do over there. I knew what my school of communications was about, but had no idea what this school was about. I was an introvert. I still like to say that I am an introvert. And I thought I was going to go over to this school, get a pamphlet, read it, and just find out what they did. Well, I did. I went over to the school after class, and I went to the front desk, and the receptionist was there. She said, I can hand you a pamphlet, but our assistant dean is available if you'd like to talk to him. I just told you guys I'm an introvert. I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted to read this pamphlet and go home. I did wind up speaking with him. He gave me an hour of his time. And by the end of the conversation, I had switched majors, and I was now, on my path to sports and recreation. And because I had taken so many classes in communications, it was, the next step.
Well, I won't fault you for being an Eagles fan. I'm a Cowboys fan, so of course.
We all make bad decisions in life, and we can talk about it. All love.
See, and you know what was really bad when my client played for the Sixers, so he had to go to a lot of Eagles stuff. It was very hard and traumatic for me, but it's okay. Uh, Tahira, go ahead and share your journey.
Well, also thank you for having me be a part of this. So mine is not actually very different than DeeDee's or Sahar's. I am originally from Boston, Massachusetts, so I grew up in a very sports dominating town. So you couldn't not love sports, but coincidentally to DeeDee, both my grandmothers, my maternal and my paternal grandmother, were huge sports lovers. My family's from the Caribbean, so soccer was a thing you did no matter what. It's kind of like a rite of passage in our life. So I always knew I wanted to work in sports. I actually at 14 said I was going to be the first Black female president of an NFL franchise. It didn't happen because there is one, and she happens to be my boss. So that worked out really well. So it just was something that was innate in me. Like I remember watching, Carl Lewis win the Olympics, and I was probably 5 or 6, right? So it's just always been something I've always known. And although I had a different path and I did lots of different careers, everything just kind of always was like, didn't you remember you wanted to do this? Remember you wanted to work in sports? And so I finally pursued it, and here I am.
Okay, so I brought you all here today to celebrate Black women in sports. I kind of wanted to, since diverse representation started this a year ago now, and it's becoming an annual day, and we're celebrating in many different ways on today. What does this day mean to each of you? And, the achievements that Black women have made. Speaking of your boss becoming, for the Raiders. So let's just talk about that. And I'll just start with you, Tahira.
Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? It's a huge thing for me because coming up, there wasn't women who looked like me. So although at 14, I said I wanted to be the first Black female president of an NFL franchise, that was a huge undertaking to have said. That was similar to saying we were going to see a Black president, right? Like that just of the United States. That just wasn't something that most people thought that was super lofty. Like, okay, girl, go ahead. That's what you want to do. And so to have that be a thing now, to be a part of something like that, that's huge for me. It's kind of like full circle moment. But at the same time, it's also super important because now there are people who can look to something. There was nothing I could really look to. I kind of had to figure it all out. These things didn't really exist. And if they did, they weren't common knowledge for someone who wanted to get into the industry. So having our own day like this is amazing. I think especially because it highlights so many women. I think Sahar said it earlier that I consider sisters, that I consider friends, that I look up to. So for me, it's huge.
DeeDee?
I didn't get a chance to ever see her compete in person, but I remember years ago, many moons ago, there was a movie on the life of Wilma Rudolph. And that movie, I just remember sitting in front of the TV as a young child and watching that. And I was just in awe that there was this Black woman who was just out there running and just conquering. And it filled me with so much pride. And so as I started to, go down the rabbit hole further and become a bigger sports fan, especially those sports where you could see the physical female representation were the ones that I definitely sort of gravitated towards, especially when I started working in athletics at UW Milwaukee, the soccers. Like I became such a big fan of women's soccer, because I was in this space and I got a chance to see on the field of play, just dominating in their space. And so to me, Black women in sports just represents just this tremendous amount of strength and resilience, and just fortitude and fierceness, that we won't be denied. Florence Griffith Joyner, those types of women in the space, just when I would see them, especially when she competed in the Olympics, like I just remember sitting there just crying. I was like, how is this? This is just amazing to me. And so, to have this day to be able to formally recognize us in this space where, these women work so hard at their craft. And working in athletics and knowing the amount of work that goes into being the best in your space, being able to compete at a high level, is just, to me, working in that space now is just my way of giving back and pouring into those young women so that they can continue to move forward, because that representation is just everything. And while it may be, long past my days of even potentially dreaming of competing, it's my way of being able to give back and being able to celebrate and uplift them. And so I'm just really excited anytime I see Black women in spaces where they are competing, and just being able to show just how strong they are. Because I think that sports definitely brings out those qualities of resilience, of fierceness. I'm not going to quit and until it's over. And so I celebrate, and I feel like I hope that it rubs off on me in some of my areas of life and work, even though I'm not an athlete.
Sahar?
I don't know if I can follow. I mean, I think they did so well there. The one thing that I will say is that I don't know that we celebrate ourselves. So what I love about this is the opportunity to do that. Everything else that Tahira and DeeDee said, I could echo. But I think the opportunity to celebrate ourselves is another reason why I think this day is just so important.
So I'm going to ask some personal questions in here. Tahar, you work in the NFL. Can you tell us about some experiences, how you've navigated the unique challenges and opportunities that come with being a woman in such a high-profile team in Las Vegas and in a male-dominated league?
Full transparency, I've kind of had more difficulty when I worked in other leagues than I do in the NFL, but I do attribute that to the fact that our chief sales officer is a Black woman and our president is a Black woman. And so I know that my name is being said in rooms that I'm not in, where that's not always the case in other places that I've been. I think in general, I don't think I've experienced anything different than most Black women have in a corporate space, period. But I think the biggest challenge has always been making sure that people understand that, like, I actually do know what I'm talking about, right? And so you sometimes get that a lot. In other places I've been, it's been more of a comment of like, oh, you actually know what you're doing. Yeah. Yes, I do, right? I think about, and I hate to bring up the past, but I think about the comment that Cam Newton had made a while back when there was a reporter who said something about running routes, and he was kind of like shocked that a woman knew anything about that. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is not necessarily in the workplace, but how people treat me outside of the workplace, right? Where there's this need to prove that I know what I'm talking about. We joke about you tell a guy you like sports and they're like, name 5 players, right? Like, it's kind of like I deal with that, and it's not really the internal thing. I think specifically with the Raiders and them being a team for so long that's always embraced a lot of DE&I. We had the first Black Hispanic coach, we had the first Black coach, first Black female president. So the Raiders, being at the Raiders is one of the best places for me to be and to not have those sorts of experiences. And I think the best way that I've dealt with it in the past is just making sure that I'm always on top of my game, right? So that when I am speaking up and I am demanding that you hear me and I'm asserting myself in a boardroom or whatever that is, that I'm backing that up with actual facts, success. And so I think that that's been the biggest thing for me, is just making sure that, because they might be doubting me and there might not be a lot who look like me that get these opportunities, I have to always be bringing my A game. But I do know that once you've presented it and you know it, the respect comes, and I really don't have to continuously prove myself once people kind of understand and get, that I'm about business, but I also get it done too.
So speaking of that, I wanted to see, can each of you tell me a defining moment in your career that tested your resilience and how you managed to navigate it? Just talking about that. Sometimes, like you said, we may have to prove ourselves elsewhere, not necessarily in that space. But if you want to talk about that, please elaborate.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I think for me, I can, much like Tahira talked about, I think there have been many moments. So I don't know if I could clearly give you one, but I can tell you that every moment led to when it happened again, I knew what it was before it got to me. Meaning I do have one instance where, and something I just wrote down, communications, I can't help it. Aggressive versus that assertion. I had a supervisor who I'd worked with for a long time, and I was quite surprised when I was brought into an area that was not that was a public space to somewhat reprimand me on something that happened where he was not my managing supervisor on site, nor was he fully aware and or asked me what happened, but instead told me basically what I had done. And when I collected myself and set up an appropriate meeting space that was closed door, and I was able to have a conversation with him, and I outlined where I felt that the conversation had been wronged and what the proper protocol would have been. That's when I knew that I was in a position where, previous situations, I would not have set up a meeting. I wouldn't have known how to handle it. I don't know that I would have went to what I consider my board, which is, my group of friends that work in and out of sports that, I counsel with. I don't think that I would have known how to handle it professionally. But I knew exactly how to do it because I had had other moments throughout my career where they, fortunately or unfortunately had led to that. I think the stigma of that aggression or, versus assertion versus passion versus knowledge that, always getting checked on who and what we are. I think that will continue just by virtue of us working in a male dominated industry. But I always tell people when I walk in the door, I am several things, most of which you can see. I'm female, Black, none of those things are changing. So, okay, now that we've gotten those out of the door, because that's your issue, not mine. Now, how are we going to proceed? So yeah, that's how I would answer that.
DeeDee, did you want to share anything?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Sahar, it was the microaggressions. It was the I remember an incident distinctly when I was at my previous place of employment. I was the only person of color on our senior team, and we had a very passionate director of athletics who didn't mind expressing her opinions about things. And when I would get excited about things, I would always be the one who was called into the office after the meeting and said that I needed to tone it down, that I needed to fix my face, that I needed to, I was intimidating other people. And at first, when you hear that type of feedback, it throws you off. But similar to Sahar, it's at some point I developed the courage to push back and say, I'd like to talk a little. Let's dive a little bit more into this perception that when I express something in maybe a passionate manner, that I've all of a sudden turned into this bully and I need to fix my face and all of those different things. And a lot of times, as we all know, when you do those things, when you do, push back, ask more questions, love for you to elaborate more on those things, you don't get any real answers because, the prejudice, the misconception is definitely coming from the other side of the room or the other side of the table. And so that, was those instances taught me that I needed to be comfortable in my own skin. And that as long as I was treating people respectfully, that I wasn't going to buy into and I wasn't going to allow people to paint me with a brush as being aggressive, as being the angry Black woman, as being any of those things that they tried to, portray me as, and that I was going to continue to conduct myself and carry myself in the vein that I was carrying myself in because I had done nothing wrong. And so, it's those things. It's really, I don't see differences between what happens in athletics as opposed to, what happens in corporate for women of color. The same problems exist, the same microaggressions exist, the same prejudices exist. And so it's just up to us to, strategically come back at them and not let that be something that sidelines you, because unfortunately, it's not too many places you can go where it's not going to rear its ugly head at some point.
Both of you spoke about that. I remember on my journey, I was sitting in a weekly meeting. And it was at the end, and mind you, I'm in a room with middle-aged men, and I'm the only person of color and the only female in the room. And at the end, I remember one of the gentlemen, he said, I went to, I'm going to use this as an example, Clemson, and I did X, Y, and Z. And how did you get here? And it was kind of like, first of all, why are you asking me that question? But I'm like, well, we're sitting at the same table, and I went to a HBCU, and I did X, Y, and Z, and here I am, and we are doing the same job. And it's always those things when they try to address you as if you shouldn't be there, and that this is the seat I'm supposed to sit in at this time on my journey. And so, back to what Sahar said, I'm happy that we are now celebrating ourselves and what we have accomplished in this space. So I'm gonna go back to Sahar and talk about you working in soccer. Being a Black woman working in soccer, do you find it challenging sometimes shaping the voice and narrative of a men's league and trying to find inclusivity, representation, and just communicating that to everyone?
No, because I'm a storyteller. That's what part of my job is, and again, my previous experiences, I had a supervisor when I worked at the MEAC who I did not work on women's sports. We flipped. Baseball. I mean, I did have some women's sports, but she was strategic in making sure that I covered sports that were not typical sports that females covered, so that I would have that as something in my toolbox. So that was an experience that I had. Coming to Major League Soccer, this is a global game. So me being a person of color in this, it's probably a little bit more black and white here in the United States, but there is a global game. Right now we have Copa America going on. We have Euros going on. Our MLS season is going on right now. All things are leading up to World Cup in 2026. The game is going to be here in the United States, so no, I don't, I've been fortunate that I haven't dealt with, some of those prejudices or, things that would be more challenging for others in the space that I currently am in. I think I also have a great group that I work with. My supervisor, who happens to be my direct supervisor, who happens to be female as well. I work with an international staff. It's quite difficult to, not that it can't happen, but it's, I think, a little less likely when you have a group in the room that is, diverse, because the conversations, tend to be that way. We're talking, about domestic media, we're talking about global media, and yes, there are still challenges, but I haven't seen them in the fashion or form that I have in some of my previous, stops.
Well, let me know when you go to World Cup. I'll send my daughter with you. Put her in your suitcase. We're gonna flip it. In the sense we've talked about some of the challenges, how we've overcome those things. How do you use your platform to inspire and empower the next generation? And I'll let DeeDee go first. I'll ask each of you that question.
Oh gosh, I have been at the NCAA for 7 years. I've been in a leadership position for almost 6 of those 7 years. And so back in 2019, I believe, or maybe it was 2020, we did a comprehensive overhaul of our programs and services. And one of the tenets of the overhaul was to make sure that we were couching our programs under the umbrella of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, so that student athletes could see themselves in those who coach, teach, and lead them. So like right now, I'm here in your team's hometown, Dallas. And I know it just kind of made me a little ill to say that, but I love it. I just, but I'm here, and we are kicking off a program this evening for football coaches, Division I football coaches of color. It's a year-long program where we work to prepare them to ascend into those head coaching positions. And it is a very intense program, but again, that representation is important. It is extremely important. We know that when you have student athletes or former student athletes up in front of the room and they are speaking to current student athletes, those student athletes sit up a little higher. You know, they pay more attention because there's somebody that they're looking at that they know has been through what they are currently going through or is an aspirational figure. And so that representation is important. You know, it brings in that knowledge of background, the experiences that are had, the experiences that are yet to come. And so that is really one of the most important things that I'm proud of in the work that we do today is that we approach our work in this space with that intentionality of making sure that we are doing what we can as a very large membership organization that is mired in scandal all the time and you know has all these different things going on, that we're able to take that little bitty slice of what we do at the NCAA in leadership development and use that work to make sure that not only are we supporting the experiences of the student athletes in a positive way and preparing them for the future, but also giving them a glimpse into what the future can look like for them in this space through that representation.
Tahira?
I think one, doing things like this, right? So I try to do things. I recently spoke at the Black Sports Business Symposium, and there's a lot of college students there. And so I got an opportunity to kind of share my journey with them. And I think that that's the biggest thing too, is that, you know, the path to success isn't not one specific way. And you can, you know, I talk a lot about your career being more of like a jungle gym than it is a ladder. So I try to take the opportunity to do panels and symposium and conferences, but I also really just open my space up to people who reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm going to really try to make myself available for as many people who ask for advice as much as possible. I'll also in that when I'm in a space, when I was working in NASCAR back in like 2020, 2021, I know NASCAR had made a really big push to have more Black drivers, more Black fans, more Black employees. And so I found it was super important that I connected with Black-owned businesses in Nashville. And so I did a lot of work with TSU, Tennessee State University, and HBCU, the National American Museum of African American Music, the National Museum of African American Music, Slim and Huskies at the time, is still, I believe, is one of the only Black-owned pizza franchises in the country. So really just use my platform to help elevate other voices. A lot of these places did not need, Uncle Nearest was another one. They didn't need my voice, right? They're one of the fastest growing Fortune 500 companies there. But the reality is working with them in conjunction with them helped me kind of have another platform and put myself out there and kind of show other people, right? So to what I spoke to earlier, making sure that I'm present in the space in a way that I didn't always get to see. And so that's one of the ways that I really do use my platform, right? So I hope that people see it, whether it's on my social media or my LinkedIn. I hope that they see that I really do believe that, you know, when you walk through the door of opportunity, you don't slam it shut, you hold it open for other people. And I think doing things like this is one of the best ways that I can showcase that.
Sahar, if you wanted to tap into that question. Uh-oh. It's okay. I'm going to follow back up with DeeDee. I know you were talking about some of the programs that you are able to implement and host with the NCAA. I want to talk about, how do you define your role and what initiatives within these programs are you most passionate about in fostering that leadership role for student athletes and administrators, especially women?
So my role as managing director is to I oversee a team of change agents, is what I call them. I'm blessed to have a team of staff that is very passionate about the work that we do. We take it very seriously. But our job is to serve the student athletes two ways. One is through programs and services that have a direct touch. The second is through the education and development of those who coach, teach, and lead them. And again, this is all under the umbrella of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging so that our student athletes can see themselves in those who coach, teach, and lead them. The beauty of the work that we do is that we get to touch a lot of different people in a lot of different spaces in a lot of different ways. Our programs are created in a pipeline form, and so we can educate and develop student athletes all the way from that student athlete space up to those individuals who aspire to be directors of athletics or conference commissioners. Same with coaches, from that student athlete space all the way up to those who aspire to be head coaches. And then we have programs that we've developed over the years through research that are set to help to boost up the number of women and minorities in different spaces where the numbers are definitely lagging and representation is lacking, and then provide a different leadership pathway for those individuals in that space. One program in particular that I'm really proud of is our program called Foundations of Fundraising. And this is a program that was created about 3 years ago with the goal of increasing the number of development and fundraisers in the college athletic space, the number of women and ethnic minority development and fundraisers in this space, because the numbers are abysmal. They're starting to move into a different direction, a positive trajectory. And so I'm really excited about that. But it is a program that equips the learners with a different skill set. And for those who are already in the space, it gives them enhanced learning because there truly is an art and science to fundraising. And so to have that means that you have something in your toolkit that will then potentially take you further in your career. And we've already seen our learners be able to make career moves from the education that they receive. The other program that I'm extremely proud of is one that I did not create, but it's one that I am a very proud alum of. And so is Sahar. And that is our Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute was created over 20 years ago by Dr. Charles Whitcomb. And the goal was to provide space for ethnic minority administrators in college athletics to be able to learn, to grow, and to build community. And I am a proud alum of the program from 2013, 2014. And I tell people all the time that program changed my life because I walked into it and I was able to see that there were all of these beautiful people of my ethnicity in this room, learning and growing with me together and sharing our problems and situations and issues that we had in this space, but also gaining the skills and building camaraderie so that we had a community to help push us forward in this space. It's the only program that I know in college athletics that has a continuing education component to it. So our alumni group is very unique, very strong, and we come together every year. So as a matter of fact, they will be here in about 10 days for their annual continuing education program. But it's truly a program that changed my life and changed my career, and I would not be in the space that I'm in today had I not participated in it. So I'm really proud of the work that we do as a department. I'm proud of the efforts that we make to be able to build platforms for women, for ethnic minorities to be able to climb up on and move forward. And I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to be able to do something every day that I love to do. It's not a job for me, it's a joy.
So I want to talk about work-life balance. And I know sports is 24/7, so sometimes it's kind of hard to have work-life balance. As I sit here in a hotel room and my daughter's playing in the championship soccer game in the tournament, but we want to talk about work-life balance. How have you maintained it, and what tips would you give young women or men coming up in the game trying to have a job in the sports industry? And Sahar, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I hate the term work-life balance because the truth is there's no such thing. What you do is you prioritize. And it took me a really long time to learn that. And it's something that I still at times have to navigate. And how I utilize it now is I do everything through, a lot through calendars, but I'm also, I set boundaries. So I try to make it so that, family is extremely important to me. My friends are extremely important to me. The things that I like to do that aren't sports related, because although I enjoy sports, there's a lot of times where I don't want to be anywhere near an arena. Don't talk to me about a score. I don't want to hear about a player because I am doing it all the time. So I think that prioritizing and setting those boundaries, as we were talking before I joined the call, I live in Pennsylvania. I work in New York. So part of my commute is managing those boundaries. So there are days where I will let my supervisor know, hey, I'm going to scoot out a little bit early today so that I can be home at a more reasonable time. And so for me, that's how we work things. Or there may be an extra day throughout the week, throughout the month that I stay home and work from home versus coming into the office and it's great because she realizes she's going to get what I'm doing, whether I'm there or I'm not. But me being it makes me a better person when I'm able to, go to dinner with, my 6-year-old nephew, or, the other day you emailed me and I was literally at the pool and I missed the email. There were times where that wouldn't have happened. I have a now 18-year-old nephew, and every year I missed his birthday because we had a tennis championship that I was at every year on occasion. So there were, times where you just have to prioritize. And once you set those boundaries, then I think that's how you are able to manage what people deem as work-life balance.
So I know you're you were at an Aces game. It was not for work, but you took time to come up here. So talk about, how do you maintain that?
Yeah, well, actually, the Aces are owned by the Raiders. We have the same ownership group, so it could be considered work. But I think DeeDee alluded to it earlier. I do what I love for a living. I get joy out of what I do. So work doesn't really feel like work to me. And that's sort of how I get my work-life balance. I do love sporting events and I do love going to concerts. So when the Raiders are hosting a Copa America game, whether I have to work or not, probably I'm going to go because I get the opportunity to go to a Copa America game for free, right? This past season, I'm a huge Celtics fan. I went to game 2 and I went to game 3, right? It's one in Boston and one in Dallas, and it's using my network to do so, which means when I'm getting those tickets to things, it means when they're in my city, I go out my way to take them to drinks and do things like that. So I don't really have a work-life balance, if that makes sense, because a lot of my life part is so heavily involved in my work part. But I think what Sahar said is important too, that the things that matter to me, right? So I live on the complete opposite side of all of my family members when you talk about proximity in the country. And so when I get an opportunity to have a Thanksgiving off, I go home. And when I need to put a out of office on, I do so, right? And so like my direct supervisors, they know if there's something important going on, like they can count on the fact that like I'll make sure I look out for that email and I'll do my very best to respond to it in a timely manner if we're on a time crunch about things. But I'm very intentional about not answering emails when I'm on my PTO, right? I think that that's the biggest thing for me. And I think the other part is like do something that you love and hopefully work in an organization that you like working for, because then it doesn't really feel like work, because the reality is it seeps into it. Right. So, yeah, I'm enjoying myself at an Aces game, which is, defensive player of the year. OK, but another Black woman in sports. Right. And so for me, it kind of just is all very interchanging. It's one thing. I hope I can bring my family out to games and enjoy these things with me while I'm at work. But so I don't really think it's really about a balance for me. It's about finding the best way to make them just meld together.
It's funny you say that because I love sports, right? So growing up, I kind of always said I wanted to have a hobby that I got paid for, right? So, I love to do this and I happen to get paid for it. That's kind of how I tried to look at it. And even when we're traveling, there are times when I I want to say, okay, we're traveling. Oh, who's playing? Because I still want to go to this game, or I still want to do this, or I just want to take my daughter on a stadium tour or arena tour,
Mhm.
even if they're not playing. So you're still living the life in that
Mhm.
area. And then I will remember when you talk about prioritizing, I was on a trip to Cabo with my daughter. And I happened to look at my phone and she was like, Mom, are you going to be on your phone the whole time? And I realized then, now, when I take a vacation and she was younger, I slide the email thing off. So I won't even see the emails tick up because in my mind, as they tick up, I'm like, oh my God, I have all these emails that I need to read. And so it's like, if it's time to shut off, I need to shut off, especially when I'm with my daughter. So DeeDee, let's talk about how do you maintain and prioritize?
Building off of what was said, I look at it as work life integration. And
Mhm.
so when I was in the business, first in the business many years ago, my daughter, Alexis, was probably around the same age as your daughter. And so it was a space where I integrated her into my work. And so she was able to, travel with me when I would travel with the teams or come to games, but it was never required because I knew that some of the things that I needed to do, wanted to do, she may not want to do. And so having a job that I love to do, there's a lot of things that I did that, I probably didn't necessarily have to do, but I did it anyways. Because I wanted to do it because I enjoy being in the space. I love to see the student athletes compete. And so now I look at it from the standpoint of um, autonomy is important nowadays with staffs, with people. And so the staff that I lead, the way that I think they're able to look at work life balance or work life integration is I give them the autonomy to design their work lives as much as I can within the rules of the organization. And sometimes I do color outside of the lines. I
Mhm.
give them that autonomy until they prove that they can't handle it.
Mhm.
Um, our jobs are very time consuming, they're very stressful, there's a lot of travel involved. And so I'm not the one that monitors when someone comes in as far as time wise during the day or if they come in to work at all. My expectations are my expectations no matter where you are. And I get that because that's the same thing that my boss Felicia Martin has for me. Her expectations are her expectations, no matter if I'm sitting in a hotel room in Dallas or if I'm sitting in my house in the suburbs of Indianapolis. And so I look at that and I say that, while we're not fully remote, having the opportunity to spend time outside of the office and being given the autonomy and the trust to do their jobs to the best of their abilities, to me, I always feel like I get more out of my staff than those people who are in the office and saying that you have to come in at this certain time, you have to leave at this certain time. I get way more out of my staff because I give them the opportunity to design their lives the way that works best for them. I will admit on this panel today, I am not the best person with the work life integration. I too, Alexis, I get stressed. I was just off this past week. I get stressed sometimes when I think about the emails. Some things I look and I say I want to handle right away. But I'm also making a concerted effort this year to be present when I am not off. And so those are the things that I'm working on for myself. But I feel like as far as a leader, I want to give my team the autonomy to design their lives the way that they need to because I know that this work is taxing and I know that this work is takes a lot out of people but I want them to operate in the most optimal way possible.
So I want to ask some fun questions along this journey this conversation we're having. Um, what's one surprising fact about your job that most people wouldn't expect? So I'll give you a moment to think about it. So one surprising fact, or even fun fact, if you want to make it that way, that people wouldn't expect. Um, I'll let you go first here.
Oh wow, I don't know. I think I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what work looks like for me, but I think the biggest thing is what people probably ask me the most is, do I see the players? Do I interact with the players a lot? And there is an invisible wall that exists between the players side of the office and the front office side of the office. And I say that to say, you might even hear like coaches or somebody say front office, they're talking about their front office. They are not, they're talking about their administration and their, they're not talking about my side of the business. And so I think that that's the biggest thing, right? Because I've met athletes along the way. I have friends, from college and stuff, and a lot of them have zero clue what I do.
Oh yeah.
They don't know the importance of my role in my job, and that like the reason there's fans in the stands is that's me. And so I think that's the biggest conception. I don't work around the players. I don't see the players. We're not best friends. I'm just out here on my grind the same way that they are. We're kind of two totally different people kind of in the same organization, if that makes sense. I think that's the biggest surprise. Most people would be surprised.
But you're giving us wonderful game day experiences, okay?
Yes, that is the plan.
Yep.
DeeDee?
Fun fact or misconception about my job. I do not have an unlimited supply of Final Four tickets.
DeeDee, what? I can't call you, DeeDee. I can't call you.
No. So I end up with a lot of fast friends, as I call them, when I share with people where I work and what I do, and inevitably the conversation leads down that path of, oh, so you get tickets, and oh, can you look out for your girl, or can you look out for your boy? And I hate disappointing people, but I have to disappoint them and let them know that I'm staff, and so yes, I've worked the required number of years to be able to get my two free tickets to the men's and women's Final Four. But after that, that's it. And so, just the disappointment in people's faces when they find that out. It just, it's heartbreaking, but it's true. I don't carry them in my back pocket. And so I just don't have an unlimited supply of Final Four tickets.
It's so funny. When I was managing professional athletes, NBA, NFL, people would be like, oh, can I get a ticket to a game? And I have to remind them, the players still pay for these tickets. It's not like they get 10 tickets and I'm going to give them away every game. No, they have to pay for that skybox. They have to pay for these courtside seats, so I can't give you anything that they can't really give away either. They're paying for it. But Sahar.
First of all, there used to be like a running joke when we were at the NCAA that there, just like I have a T-shirt on today, it was like something to the effect that I don't have tickets. I also just want to fresh out. And I think it's hilarious because I worked at the NCAA for almost 8 years, got to that final spot where I finally could get my men's Final Four tickets for free, and then pandemic hit. So I didn't even get to enjoy the fruits of my labor for the time that I worked there. So I think that's hilarious. For me, I don't know if this is a fun fact, but this came to mind. People would be surprised at how much behind the scenes go into the things that we do from an event standpoint, or from me, my everyday in communications. I often joke that, we are often, the duck, and you can just see the duck and it looks pretty. And if you only knew how we were treading water or what it looks like under it, or the things behind the scenes, I have countless stories where I could tell you about having to fly in a video for our player of the year announcements when I worked at the MEAC, because we needed to get it there, because at that time you didn't digitally send that kind of stuff. I'm showing age. Or the idea that just this past a couple months ago we were announcing our all-star location for next year from MLS, and I am upstairs in a room using a hairdryer to dry some executive's jacket, because an armadillo that we had in the room messed his jacket up while he was holding it. Like, things that are just beyond the other duties as required. I think people would be surprised as to what that looks like. And I also think they would be surprised to know the hours. We talked a little bit about that, but I often joke that I am typically the first one in and the last one to leave. So you may want my job, but you may not once you go through a week of an event, with me.
Well, and we can share stories. I know you were at the MEAC and I was at the CIAA. I felt like when we had the CIAA basketball tournament, I did not sleep for 10, 12 days. Like you're just, I don't know how I'm making it.
We had a rule. Yeah, we had a rule. We couldn't say that you were tired. So you literally were going 7 days. And then on that 7th day, after literally they cut the ribbon, and I see some family on here in the chat, like, who can empathize. Like that was the moment where you could be like, I'm tired.
Well, and all the work you put in leading up to it. And then you have these like 7 days of 24 hours straight. I feel like you're just working, and
we're crazy because we go back and do it again. Like I was just at Women's Final Four moderating, and again, my role there was a lot more fun because I didn't have to. It wasn't the full 24 hours. I get to come in, moderate the women's press conferences, and then leave. But yeah, I mean, crazy, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, and I joke about it now, but it probably was very crazy back then. I gave birth to my daughter January 1st. I was on maternity leave. I came back the week before the CIAA tournament, and my baby and my mother, shout out to my mother, I know she's probably watching, she brought my baby with me so I could at least have her at night, but that was really team no sleep. But you're trying to work integration, make sure you spend time with your kid, and you're working, and I was fresh off maternity leave. So I don't know how I survived. I guess I was a lot younger then, but I survived. So this is going to be the last question. I really appreciate you all for taking time out. Looking back, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self who was starting out in the sports industry? And I will let DeeDee go first.
Oh my gosh. Piece of advice I would give my younger self would be never to discount the possibilities. I started in athletics as a secretary at UW Milwaukee, and for years, didn't see myself as anything other than that. And it was actually what others saw in me that started me on the path to where I am now. And so to go from a secretary to a managing director in an organization, first of all, it's nothing but the Lord looking out for me. But it was him showing me the possibilities that if I worked hard, if I, put my care into people, put my care into the work that I was doing, and put my care, and into myself, that I could be. I ended up being something that I never even envisioned that I could be. So I think that I would, say to myself that, there's truly anything's possible. And sometimes that's hard to believe because you can't really see it. You can't touch it. It's not there. But you have to believe in it. It's almost like you have to have a blind faith in it. And now that I know that anything's possible, it actually gives me a sense of excitement in my life to say that, anything's possible. So a year from now, I could still be, doing the job that I love doing in the space that I'm in right now, or I could be off doing something else that I love to do. But it's just really about embracing that belief that anything's possible and that you truly can do anything.
And just so you know, I'm taking that, never discount the possibilities. That is a running tagline now. Sahar.
Oh goodness. Every moment has, just a reminder that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in that moment. Everything that I've done from a career perspective, none of it has been my own doing. And that's you and I could have another conversation for a whole hour of, what my start was and how I got here. And I'm sure the same for Tahira and DeeDee. But I would just say that everything that I've done has been a precursor for what was next, or building me, even if I didn't know I was ready. There were times where I thought, I was in certain positions and I was ready to go, and God had not moved me yet. And I'm like, Lord, but I'm telling you, like, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And he hadn't done it yet. And then when he did, it has every time it's been beyond my wildest imagination. I didn't come in thinking that I was going to work at the NCAA. I know people have that as their ceiling. That wasn't my ceiling. But once I got there, I realized I'm going to do everything that I can while I'm here. And I did. And then once I mastered that, I knew it was time to go on to the next. And again, it was at least a year before he moved me, but I'm like, Lord, I'm ready. No, I wasn't, because when he did, he moved me to a space that I didn't even know that I was going to, be in. And I worked in agency, and I did that for a while. And then I knew I was ready to go, and I'm like, Lord, I'm ready. And no, I still wasn't. And then when he moved me in this step that I'm in right now at Major League Soccer, I look back and every had been a stepping stone. I can literally pull examples and tools and, knowledge and people and my environment and all of those things, so I am very, very cognizant of, my faith and what that means, and the, and how it's, the foundation of, and where I go. I talked about having a board and friends and family, and I have that, but I always pray about whatever my move is going to be before I do anything.
I wish my answer was very different, but it's not. It's really not. I think the normal advice, right? Network, work hard, be dedicated, sacrifice. I think that's par for the course, right? For me, it would definitely be telling my younger self to stay faithful. And the reason I say that is I've moved to 7 states in 7 years in pursuit of my career, right? A lot of moving to places where I didn't know a single soul. Where how do I even start over, right? Like, I have to find a new doctor and a new this, and there was just so much. And every time it was just about remaining faithful, that I wouldn't be here if I wasn't supposed to be here, and what's meant for me won't pass me. And so that was just, if I could tell myself, my younger self, that, it probably would have made a lot of the doubts that I had every time that I moved or had to make a decision on. I just got to the NFL in my first job, and then I got an opportunity to leave it to go be a director. And it's like, do I give that up, right? And that was one of the things when that happened. I got an opportunity in my first director role, leaving the 49ers and going to Seattle, where I didn't know a soul. And when they told me where they were sending me, I cried real tears in his office, because I couldn't. Seattle, I'd never been there. I'd been, but not like that. And which was crazy. And so I ended up flying back into the Bay Area for a birthday trip. And I was just at a restaurant with a friend, and a guy walks up to me at the table, and he says, I hope I don't weird you out, but I came here for a message that God wanted me to tell you that everything's going to work itself out. And I will never forget that. I took a picture of him. I still have it in my phone. And that was what I would remind my younger self, was like, girl, what's for you will not pass you. And so just remember that if you're here, even if it's not where you're supposed to be in this moment, to Sahar's point, you need to be here now in order to go to the next place. So I wish I had a different answer than DeeDee and Sahar, but it's just about remaining faithful.
Well, just thank you. I thank you for all the guidance, the inspiration you have poured into some of our youth and adults across Zion. I just really, 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 from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I know it's 4th of July weekend. I know some of you are traveling. And so I just want to say I appreciate you. They can find you all on LinkedIn if they need to connect with you. So I know all of you are on LinkedIn. So please screenshot their names, take their names down. The flyer will still be up. Thank you all again, and I hope all of you have a blessed day. Have a good All-Star weekend. Enjoy your upcoming season, and enjoy your event tonight too, DeeDee.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.